Hello and a very warm welcome to the State of the Borough debate, COVID impact and recovery. It is absolutely fantastic to have so many of you here, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us. So before I introduce myself and my fellow panellists, I would just like to talk about a few logistics. I should let you know that this event is being recorded and it will be available later, so if you are unable to stay for the whole event, you can catch up a little bit later on, but hopefully we have you for the entire evening through until 9 o'clock. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to you for submitting your questions in advance. What we're going to do is we're going to be answering those questions as we go through the evening, and then after a break of 10 minutes or so for a refreshment around about 8 o'clock, we're going to be also answering live questions that will be coming in via the Google platform on the YouTube chat. So my name is Sian Jones, and as a long-term London resident, it's my absolute pleasure to be here. I have been involved in some of the State of the Borough debates before, so it's absolutely wonderful to be invited back. And as a TV presenter, a regular on the ITV Morning News, Bloomberg, CNBC, as well as Channel 5, my job tonight is really to make sure that we have a good debate, a good discussion, and that your voices are heard and your questions are answered. Also, afterwards, there's going to be a short feedback form, so do take a moment to fill that in, because it's only by hearing from you that we understand how these events are going down and what we can improve on. And of course, it is so important to have you here, because actually this is about gathering your feedback on views on some of the burning issues when it comes to COVID impact and recovery. So thank you so much for all being here. So to kick things off now, I'm delighted to hand over to Councillor Andreas Kirsch, who's leader, of course, of Kingston Council. Andreas, it's brilliant to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sian. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this year's State of the Borough debate in Kingston. And thank you all for joining us this evening. It's great to see such a diverse panel and lots of residents getting involved, again, handing in questions in advance and hopefully handing in questions during the debate tonight. We hold the State of the Borough debate every year to start a discussion with the community on a specific topic, and as a chance for you to share your thoughts and ask questions. Thank you to all of you who have submitted a question for our expert panel this evening. This year's discussion topic is COVID impact and recovery. We are very proud of how the borough has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and how we as a borough came together to support our most vulnerable residents. It will be interesting to hear your views on how the pandemic impacted you and your community. Any ideas for how you think we can continue to recover together as a borough. As a community, today we find ourselves again rallying together in support and unity. This time we are standing united with the people in Ukraine. We will play our part together with our partners in providing support and reassurance to those affected of Putin's war, and we will help settle Ukrainian refugees here in Kingston. Iona Lidington, our Director for Health and for Public Health, unfortunately can't make tonight's panel. She would have been delighted to join tonight, but unfortunately she has lost her voice and I'm stepping in for her tonight. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Sian to begin the panel.
Absolutely. Andreas, thank you very much indeed. And yes, very sorry that Iona couldn't join us, but very grateful that you can step in, Andreas. So thank you so much. And thanks for setting the scene there so brilliantly. And actually what we want to do to start with is to kick off with, we were talking about residents, to hear some of the residents' voices. So we've got a short video really just highlighting how people have survived through the pandemic and the challenges that they face. So let's hear from the residents as well as charities.
So I was in year 11 at school, planning to take my GCSEs in around May, June time, and in March 2020 they announced our exams were cancelled, which was quite a shock at the time. It's sort of been this big goal that we've been working up to for kind of 2 years, if not longer, so to have it taken away was quite a shock.
There's a lot of vulnerable people out there and how to care for them, and I think it made people think different about their own situation and how they could help other people. So yeah.
So everything was worked via Teams, and people don't have sometimes confidence to speak virtually. So they would sit there in the background and be present, but maybe not present in a way that you would be in a classroom. You know, there's a lot of conversation that comes from being with people. Yeah, my number one kind of challenge probably was kind of being on my own, you know, and having to manage it. I moved out of my family home during COVID, so that was very different for me because I wasn't getting that support. It was very different.
Because we set up during COVID lockdown, it was really hard working. So we decide we'll do fundraising evening, maybe every month to make them cheerful. At the same time, we raise some fund to go through the tough life.
I feel like most people have helped out in one way or another, from collecting food or donation, or helping one another, checking on local residents, see if they're okay. Yeah, basically it's been good to see everyone helping out and doing what they can, volunteering for different aspects.
So the school kind of collectively really did pull together. We were meant to, because it was one of my final years in the school, we were meant to have kind of celebrations, and we were meant to leave to go on study leave for our exams. So the school still held as many things as they could virtually to celebrate our time, because people did leave at the end of year 11.
We learn we're not alone, and it's nice to be together. It was a hard life, but from then we discover our talent, that we could develop that, which is very, very nice.
It's shown that we can be adaptable and we can all come together, and you know, what a great job kind of the NHS have done, and kind of the challenges they faced, and kind of coming out the other side of it and just adapting. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, from delivering, say again, prescriptions and food parcels to residents who obviously couldn't get out because they were vulnerable, and visiting other people as well. And it was just for them to see a friendly face, you know, and because they hadn't been able to visit their relatives or see anyone, or been able to go out at all at times. So I think it just made a big difference to those people in particular.
There is some light emerging in terms of the easing of restrictions, in terms of moving kind of beyond the pandemic. And so I think there's kind of optimism and hope and excitement for the future, which is really nice considering kind of the nerve-wracking anxiety everyone's felt for the past 2, if not longer, years.
Fantastic. How fantastic to hear those stories and those residents' voices. Everybody's got a story, haven't they? And I'm going to hand over to our panelists now to tell their own story about their reflections and how they survived the pandemic. So first up, I'm delighted to hand over. We've got a wonderful bunch tonight, a really eclectic bunch, really diverse experiences and views. So let me hand over to Forbes, first of all, from the Chamber of Commerce. Forbes, tell us your story.
Hi, Sean. Welcome everybody to this evening. I'm delighted that you're here. We do have a really good range of speakers tonight, so it'd be good to get your flow of conversations in here. So my name is Forbes. I'm the Chief Exec of the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, which is a membership organisation representing businesses across the whole of the borough. For those who know me, that also means Tolworth, Chessington, Surbiton, New Malden, as well as Kingston. So I took on the role about 8 months before this pandemic started. I was nervous enough to take on the role in itself from my predecessor. I was hoping I wasn't going to stuff it up. And nobody prepares you for a pandemic. And I used to joke that you could go to all the bookshelves at Amazon and nothing prepared you for something like this. I think I was blessed, and I still am blessed, with an incredible team. And we learnt how we should try to network online. Essentially, as a chamber, our role is to be advocates for businesses, to connect businesses, and to support businesses. So you're going from a model from always seeing people to doing it online.
and in very difficult circumstances. But I think we all kind of found a method of how to use Zoom, to use all these different things, and actually try to keep those threads of conversations going. Business can be isolating in itself in real time, let alone a pandemic. So actually trying to keep these strands together was incredibly important. Our main part was really through our regular comms. So we'd give regular updates about the grants, all the different grants. We did a whole range of networking, and we discovered that actually if you wanted to network online, if you could somehow combine gin tasting, it worked incredibly well. Gin tasting for any event seems to work well to get numbers going. But it's been a privilege to listen to so many different businesses, what they've been doing, how they've survived, and the resilience, and it's been quite remarkable, and it's been tough as well. I think mental health is really a key thing coming out of this, listening to my own staff, people that we've missed, our families, but as that lady said at the end there, optimism and hope. There is genuine optimism and hope as we go forward. So I think listening to our businesses, and I'll say a wee bit more maybe later, there are things which we can hold on to and actually learn. But yeah, I'd say that's basically about it. Just getting through, but the stories from everybody, the resilience has been so uplifting. But the best part has been when we got to meet up again, the noise of conversation. This is what everybody misses, is just the laughter of conversation and not being in isolation. So that's been one of the biggest pluses as we come out. Thank you, Sean.
Fantastic, Forbes. Thank you. And I'm loving that gin tasting. We should have got that going tonight, shouldn't we? And is that something that resonated with you, Naz, from a healthcare perspective?
I can't honestly comment. Hi, thanks, Sean. My name's Naz Giovanni. I'm a GP in New Malden and also Borough Clinical Chair for South West London's CCGs. I think there are plenty of stories around how health and care and the community came together over this COVID period, and particularly supporting people like the homeless, the vulnerable population, and also the elderly. I'm going to take a slightly different slant on what I would like to present tonight about how the NHS came together across different organisations, and how different people from different organisations and different backgrounds actually stepped up and worked right across the NHS. So I'm going to give you 5 stories. The first one is of a lady called Emily Orme. She's a physiotherapist, and during COVID, she was redeployed as an ITU nurse to care for patients with COVID. And there are other people and other personnel that are deployed into ITU, including audiologists, neonatal nurses, outpatient clinicians, theatre nurses, and many more. The second story I want to tell you about is a GP called Dr. Nick Merrifield. He's a Kingston GP, well, New Malden GP, and he helped set up the vaccination clinic at the local Methodist church in New Malden, administering over 55,000 jabs to local residents over a 12-month period. He was supported by GPs, physios, nurses, pharmacists, anaesthetists, healthcare students, as well as local volunteers, the local authority, and people who would normally work as bar staff and airline pilots, IT managers, sixth formers, retirees, cleaners, CEOs, travel agents, and musicians. They all came together to help with the vaccination program. I think the third story I'd like to tell you is someone called Florine Ikmat, is a consultant respiratory physiotherapist, and he was redeployed to COVID initiatives, mainly around working with the local hospital and the community to pilot COVID virtual wards, and with primary care to deliver what they called oximetry at home, and also home oxygen initiatives. And he also helped out with delivering the community vaccination program to the vulnerable and housebound users. The fourth story I'd like to tell you about is a staff nurse at Kingston Hospital called Yasmin Toulet. She was redeployed to the NHS Seacall Centre at Headley Court, and this was used to help decompress Kingston Hospital's wards by taking non-COVID patients during the pandemic. And so she helped staff and run the Seacole unit at Headley Court. And the last story I was going to tell you about was I was involved as part of the GP workforce in a pilot called GP InReach, whereby when we knew our colleagues in hospital were actually struggling, we came onto the wards and helped discharge patients into the community and liaising with the GPs in the community and the community services to be able to pick those patients up. So they had confidence. There were people in the community to help them after they were recovering from COVID services. So I think in all, there's been a massive collaborative coming together across health and care, and within health and within care, and also the community of creative foundations going forward for the next couple of years to be able to work much more collaboratively together as well, helping each other in hours of need, and particularly, as you know, with the new problems which have come together around the Ukrainian war. So, so given that, I'm very happy to take questions later on. I'd like to hand over to Peter, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Naz. That's great. So our story, again, in public domain, we're a public organisation. My name's Peter, and we work across 4 colleges, Kingston College being your local one, but also South Thames in Wandsworth, Merton and Carshalton colleges as well. And our staff had to keep going all the way through teaching our vulnerable students. We have a lot of students with high needs in our colleges, and we had a responsibility there to make sure that they were looked after, safeguarded, and our staff flocked to the call when it went out to make sure that those students were safe, were fed, looked after, taught, and kept going all the way through each and every lockdown. And we had to sustain that. We did house visits to our students. We tracked hundreds of people down to make sure that they were succeeding. And we tried to stand shoulder to shoulder with everybody who was made vulnerable by the circumstances of the pandemic, and felt this. I suppose it's 2 things really that came true for us. One was that we had to dig deep to find the very best of ourselves, and in this kind of dispersed way of working, lots of people teaching from their homes, many people in college teaching those vulnerable students, but really a very distributed network of college staff keeping things going, keeping payroll going, keeping staff started and left our organisation through that period. So we had to just keep all of our normal operations running from our bedrooms and kitchen tables and sitting rooms, wherever it was we found. And we had an amazing response from our staff who kept innovating, kept finding solutions to every problem that was thrown at us, and making sure that our students were protected and safe all through this time. And the second thing that we really experienced was a really strong sense of trust between the people in the organisation, because that feeling of being in it together but yet spread out fostered an energy around our staff that meant that they committed to one another too, and they built that community that we felt was necessary to create the safety nets and the support that would actually keep us going too, because we had some very difficult moments to contend with. We lost some of our students to various things during this time, and it meant that we had to be braver than I think we've ever been, but also just find the happiness in it, find each other's hearts, and make sure that we could reach to one another, and in the darkest times actually say, it's okay, we'll get through, we're keeping going, and we have a duty to our students and the people of Southwest London never to stop going. And our staff did that. And it was the most inspiring thing at the end of all of it, to see what people were capable of when they knew they had a job to do and they knew that there were others depending on them. So it was difficult. It was really tough, but it it's brought the best out in many, many people. And but I tell you what, we're so delighted to be back on site. I can't tell you, it's just brilliant. See, I'm here at Kingston College tonight. I can't tear myself away because it's just so great to have, feet on the ground, students coming and going, questions, staff, people busying around the organisation, doing their thing, and that's as it should be. So we're here where we are now. Who knows what's coming next? But we've learned a hell of a lot during this time, and hope that the worst is behind us very, very, very strongly. I'm not sure who I'm handing over to next. I've forgotten. So sorry, Sian, can you help me?
No, absolutely, Peter. And thank you so much. Just the inspiring words that are coming out there, and that resilience and that trust that Naz was talking about as well, and just digging deep and carrying on in the most extraordinary times. So yes, I can imagine your joy now at being back there, and I can sense it. So thank you so much. That's the emotional connection there that you're all talking about. Amazing. So let's turn to the youth. And Archie, I know that you are embroiled in the youth of today, so it would be really interesting now, just to take that further after what Peter's talked about, the struggle, to hear your story, Archie.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So my name's Archie. I am the Community Learning and Participation Lead for Creative Youth, which is a Kingston-based arts and cultural charity who use the arts to empower and enrich the lives of young people. And I suppose when it comes to talking about the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic, there are kind of three perspectives that I think I'm probably bringing to this panel. The first one is obviously the perspective of Creative Youth. So we are an organisation who use the arts to empower and enrich the lives of young people. And before the pandemic, pretty much everything we delivered was obviously in person. And that obviously had to massively shift, reflecting kind of a shift in the wider arts and cultural sector. We had to move pretty much everything that we were doing online. And that came from meeting with our young creatives, who are kind of a panel of 12 young and emerging creators that steer us and guide us when it comes to delivering programming, all the way through to our International Youth Arts Festival, which is a huge fringe type activity which takes place in Kingston, in and around Kingston every summer. And all of this had to be moved online, which was obviously a huge struggle. It radically changed the way that we did things, and it radically changed the way that people were accessing and engaging with arts and culture as well. But we've also, at Creative Youth, taken this opportunity to kind of have a rethink of the things that we do, listen and take the time to engage with young people at a time when there wasn't much else that young people could do, and really kind of have a think about what our brand meant and how we could kind of move it into the future. So we've taken this opportunity to also kind of refresh and kind of take stock of what we already do. And a big part of that is sort of switching from using the term International Youth Arts Festival to Fuse International. This year will be the first time that we are kind of rebranding and relaunching our festival. And something that we really want to capitalize on is bringing back these international connections, which obviously have suffered greatly because of the pandemic as well. And I think that's kind of the first perspective that I can bring to the panel. The second one is the wider perspective of kind of people who work in the arts and cultural sector. I think we're all familiar with the idea that arts and culture has suffered greatly because of the pandemic. Museums had to close their doors, theatres didn't have people on seats. And I think that that's something that we've definitely felt and something that we are trying to kind of bounce back from at Creative Youth. Again, this is something which isn't just affecting people in Kingston, it's affecting people across London, across the nation, and indeed internationally as well. And then I think the third perspective that I'm probably bringing to this panel is, I think I'm probably the youngest person on the panel. I'm 24. I was a student when the pandemic started. I was studying an art history master's. And when this finished, it was halfway through 2020. I was unemployed for almost a year. I was on universal credit, me and the vast majority of my peers. And it wasn't until I actually started working at Creative Youth that my career has kind of bounced back. And I've managed to also pick up some sort of freelance bits along the side. So I think that that's a really important perspective to bring to this panel. Someone who is younger, who has experienced that unemployment, who has experienced a lot of the mental health challenges that have come with the pandemic, and how we can use not just arts and culture, but general regeneration in spaces like Kingston to kind of give young people like me more opportunities. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be here, and it'll be really nice to share my perspective with everyone as well. And on that note, I'm going to pass over to Fiona.
Thank you, Archie. Good evening, everyone. My name's Fiona. I'm the Future Culture Lead for the council. looking after the library services, library and heritage services across the borough. So my story in terms of COVID, I was new to the council in December 2019. I came in as a development manager for the library service. And then, of course, the pandemic and COVID hit in March 2020. And I quickly found myself overnight as part of the triage team, which was one of the teams within the Kingston Stronger Together hub, which really played a very key role throughout the pandemic. So the triage team were the team that made sure that we identified the vulnerable residents and ensured that we got food and pharmacy supplies to them. And the way that we did this was we worked closely with the voluntary and community sector. So we could not have done or achieved what we did without the community and voluntary sector. Kingston Voluntary Action, Volunteering Kingston, and that so many different groups throughout the pandemic that played a part. So that, as I say, the triage team came together overnight. We were all library staff, and overnight we formed a new team to fulfil the triage function, which meant we were working 7 days a week. We were working different hours to our normal hours, and we were working across the full week, which normally we would not have done as library staff. And the team were amazing. They showed such great resilience. We came together and found solutions every day to make sure that the residents received their food and their pharmacy. The Kingston Stronger Together hub had different teams, one for emotional support, one to make sure the pharmacy got to where it needed to go, and one for the food. We all came together every day, talked about any issues that had arisen, and found solutions. So we worked, teams came together, worked in an agile way, in a way that we'd never worked before in the council. And I know it was a very tragic time for many people and very difficult time for many. But from a personal perspective, it was probably the most rewarding work experience I've ever had, because we just felt we were making such a difference to residents and supporting them through such a difficult time. The other aspect during COVID-19 with libraries and heritage, we had to overnight pivot our services. So we went online with all our services. So we created rhyme times, which would normally have happened in a physical library space. That went online overnight. And again, the staff were creative and amazing. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And they were like lifelines, those sort of activities and events during that first lockdown, which was really so difficult because none of us had ever experienced anything like it. They became lifelines to people, those events. And the staff were obviously going through the same things that everyone was going through, really difficult emotional time, but they pulled together and offered and delivered these services. And then coming out of the pandemic more, so when we started to open up between some of the lockdowns, again, we had to then start to think about bringing the services back. And again, that was challenging because we had to still work within the restrictions, the COVID-19 restrictions, which meant we had to try and open up the services, but do it in a COVID safe way. So we had to the staff again had to really think hard and think about how they were going to deliver those services, which was so important to the residents. Part of that opening up was something we did during the summer, last Summer of Fun, next to the Kingston Museum, Kingston Library. That event, it happened over a period of about 6 to 8 weeks. And again, that was the bringing together of a range of community groups that perhaps hadn't seen each other for the whole of the pandemic. They came together during the summer, had stalls, and started to talk to each other again. And it was just amazing, that connection, and then seeing residents come into that space each day and start to connect and talk. And I can't remember which panelist it was, but mentioned just hearing the sort of laughter and the talking. I went into Tudor Drive Library last week, entered the doors, and I could hear chatting and laughing from the Knit and Natter group. And it was amazing just to be back in a physical space and feeling, that we're approaching more normal times. So I think, yeah, they're my experiences that I wanted to share, and I think I'm handing over to Pippa.
Indeed you are, Fiona. Thank you. I'm Pippa. I'm from Citizens Advice Kingston, and my story is that on Sunday the 15th of March I was at home when I got a text message from one of our paid members of the team to say that she thought she had the virus, and that changed everything for all of us. She recovered, which is obviously the most important thing. At that time you had to close your office for 72 hours completely before you even sent in cleaners and whatever. So obviously, as everybody else has said, you know, it's the people that we serve, that we're here to serve, that matter most in this situation. And we needed then to quickly shift to doing everything remotely. And I'm really proud of how we managed that as a team. So on the Tuesday afternoon, we were completely back up and helping people. So we had Monday off, as it were, while we scrabbled around to make sure that everybody had got what they needed at home to be working at home. We've been thinking about remote working in any event as soon as the virus started to emerge, because we're very keen, as everybody else has been, to keep our team safe and particularly to keep our clients safe. So we'd already invested in some cloud-based systems, and for our clients the change was really very slight. Our working remotely for our clients just meant that they needed to telephone or email us rather than schlep into the office on the bus, sit around waiting for however long they had to wait to be seen. But for the team members, as Fiona said, it was a complete revolution. So almost everything that we do in our day-to-day work was completely different. And I'm absolutely amazed at how brilliantly all of our staff, particularly our volunteers, have picked up that challenge and do now work very effectively and very efficiently remotely. In terms of the information that people needed, we kept very careful track of the headlines, and it was the most, I've been doing this for nearly 40 years, it was the most astonishing period of time in terms of the changes in regulations and in policies and practices that affect people, and we had to move everything that we were doing almost daily and definitely weekly. So as soon as furlough was introduced, people were saying to us, well, what's furlough? What does it mean? Well, we didn't know. So we found out very quickly, and then we shared all that information. And welfare benefit systems were amended. People said, well, how that would affect me? Well, we're not quite sure, but we worked and we found out, and we supported people. There were new financial systems in place, weren't there, to support people who weren't able to work for whatever reason. Again, we had to learn everything about all of that as we went. And we're very lucky because we're part of a national association, so we got a lot of our information through from head office, and we could change things, but it was a very hectic time. Through those changes, this is, I think, quite remarkable, we discovered that we could help 5 times as many people by email as we had done pre-pandemic, by making that shift and by focusing on remote working. And we found that we could help nearly twice as many people on the telephone. And we then discovered that the use of our website went through the roof. So it was 4 times as many hits on our website as pre-pandemic, which showed that we're really offering something really useful and vital to the community in terms of self-help materials, advice and information online. National Citizens Advice did a survey about what clients wanted from local services, how they wanted to contact local services, and 85% said they wanted to telephone. And if you think about it, I'm sure that, you know, everybody who's listening to this and all the panelists, if you've got a problem, you want to pick up the telephone, talk to some, get through, talk to somebody, get the answer, put the phone down, move on. So that's what we're doing, coupled with email advice and face-to-face advice via video calls. We pretty quickly got into the land of Zoom and Google Meets and whatever the other apps are. And we will always offer face-to-face, physical face-to-face appointments for people who need to see us. It has been an astonishingly rapid and complete change for all of the team, but the end service to local people has stayed constant, reliable, high quality, and focusing on those most in need. And we're very proud of being able to play our part in making the service even better for the benefit of local people, and to position ourselves very much at the fence at the top of the cliff, as well as the ambulance at the bottom. The stark thing that has come to me as everybody else has talked is the reality that for us, because what our clients need is remote services, very few of us have gone back to the office, actually. So unlike the rest of you, we have revolutionized our service and learnt that lesson from the pandemic, that this suits local people better. This is what people need. We can help more people if we work remotely. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to hand to you, Sanya.
Thank you very much, Pippa, for that smooth handover. So my name is Sanya Jeric-Kane. I am the CEO of Kingston Voluntary Action. Like I think it was Forbes, I joined the organisation actually at the very beginning of pandemic, and like Forbes, I wasn't expecting to be dealing with things that we were dealing with through pandemic, but in a way, although steep, the learning curve was very useful, and it has certainly made me realise, not that I wasn't aware of that before, but it reiterated the importance and strength of the voluntary and community sector in our borough. I have chosen tonight not to talk about our organisation, Kingston Voluntary Action, apart from mentioning that we are the only infrastructure organisation in the borough. And what that means is that we help organisations, community organisations in the borough, to set up, fundraise, grow, and become strong and resilient in order to help the most vulnerable residents of Kingston. So that's KVA, but talking about how the sector coped throughout the pandemic, hopefully will reflect how KVA achieved throughout the pandemic. We have heard from Naz and from I think Peter mentioned a few things about the community as well. I can say that Kingston Voluntary and Community Sector responded with absolute resilience and fortitude throughout this pandemic. This was not only the case with formal organisations and registered charities where we would expect this kind of reaction in difficult times, but I'm very proud to say also this was the case with small voluntary and community groups, mutual aid groups, which mushroomed all over the borough. And somebody in the film mentioned also individual residents. From providing transport, household goods, laptops, clothing, food to those in need, to, as Pippa just mentioned, offering advice on the phone to provide support, also advice and friendship to Kingston most vulnerable. Basically, the sector stepped up as it's never done before. KVA, our organisation, Kingston Voluntary Action, ran 2 surveys, 2 extraordinary. We ran many a survey, unfortunately for the sector, but we ran 2 extraordinary surveys specifically to see how sector is coping and responding to COVID. So 94% of organisations who responded to the survey reported that they stayed open or partially open all throughout the pandemic. I must say some of them that we would expect to shy away from staying open because they were, for example, working with the most vulnerable, with young children with severe learning disabilities, not only stayed open, but introduced 3 additional projects throughout the COVID to support their clients and the children of severely disabled children. Equally, in September, towards the end of last year, we ran another survey to see how the lifting of restrictions would affect the sector. And 76% of those who responded to the survey reported that they were making every effort to be offering face-to-face services for their clients. The organizations reported that 65% of them experienced increase in demand for their services. And this is not going to surprise you. It was mainly related to mental health issues, to isolation, unemployment, as people mentioned, low disposable income and food insecurity in the borough. I can't go without mentioning that whilst working really hard, the small organizations, and this was only a percentage of those who reported their fundraising efforts through the survey, but over £2 million was raised of additional income brought to the borough from external services to help our most vulnerable clients during the pandemic. I don't think we mentioned, oh well, actually no, that's not true. People mention technology a lot, but I was most impressed. We are lucky at Kingston Voluntary Action to have a project called Superhighways, and with their help, we really pivoted overnight. And I remember the night we closed the office, I think the following day we had a relatively smooth meeting of the CEO network in the voluntary and community sector in Kingston. But it was the little ones, the little organizations working with vulnerable clients that really surprised me, how quickly they started knowing how to use Teams and Zoom, how to do yoga sessions and Zumba sessions using technology. So again, we tried our best through Superhighways to support them in some cases with buying equipment, but also supporting staff of the organizations to be able to support clients, and in some cases supporting the most vulnerable with the use of technology. There were hundreds and hundreds of examples, and now that Naz mentioned 4, I wish I had more to mention tonight, but I just wanted to pick one, which was a small consortium that was formed from 5 KVA and 5 tiny organizations in the borough, mainly working with people with Black minority ethnic communities. And it was very short, big National Lottery Community Fund funded project, only 6 months. But during those 6 months, they distributed 58 tons of food across the borough, over 12,000 cooked meals, cooked from fresh food, and 11,676 bags of food. And I'm very proud to say that despite the fact that we haven't managed to raise further funding, this consortium has grown into the Good Food Group, which has started new projects and is thriving and addressing other issues now post-pandemic. When it comes to recovery, because I think we were asked to talk about that as well, I think it's absolutely necessary that we continue working in ways that we have discovered, working together in Kingston during the pandemic. So in close partnership with other sectors and other partners in the borough, finding, like we did in the pandemic, good and quick solutions for our residents and avoiding red tape whenever that is possible. One thing I wanted to mention is during the recovery, it will be very important to address burnout and mental health issues amongst staff and volunteers. This was reported through KVA service, and I'm sure that our sector is not the only one. So thinking of innovative and effective ways to address this throughout the borough, not just in our sector. This was mentioned a few times, and Peter told us how happy he is to be back in the college. So support organizations and their clients to return to face-to-face activities, obviously within the boundaries of COVID restrictions, but to do that soon, as it will be very beneficial for previously mentioned mental health of all of us, I think. We would also really like to, as part of recovery, keep the momentum with amazing mutual aids that were working really hard throughout COVID and build upon that community action in the borough. And then work more closely with health, because a pandemic has more than ever before made us aware of inequalities in health. So in the voluntary sector, we would like to work much more closer with health, with PCNs, in order to improve the health of our local communities. So that's from me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanya. And thank you to all my panelists there. That's just absolutely incredible stories there of communities coming together, how we changed, how we work differently, and what we're going to take moving forward as we recover. So that's some fantastic stories and examples. I'm aware of time, and I'm aware that we have a lot of questions that were pre-submitted, and we will be dealing with live questions coming in. So I really want to crack on now that we've shared those wonderful stories. And actually it picks up the first question that I've got, and I'm going to bring Andreas in here. I know Iona was here to talk from the public health perspective, but I'm going to ask Andreas just to pick this one up. But also it reflects what Sanya was saying there. The first question that we had submitted was, of course, Kingston is generally considered, isn't it, an affluent borough, but you know, with many other boroughs, it's got its areas of deprivation. And your stories there, Sanya, you know, resonated with me in terms of the food, the meals that you provided to those really most vulnerable people. And I think it's important to address, you know, how will we recover respecting those health inequalities, and what will be the role of community in addressing this issue. So I would like also, well, I would love to hear from all of you, but I'm going to have to be really selective on this. So I'm wondering whether, Andreas, you could kick us off with that one.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. And I think many have mentioned it already, and Sanya mentioned it just a minute ago. What the pandemic has shown is, or highlighted, the inequalities we have, even despite being an affluent borough. We have deprived areas across Kingston as well. And the pandemic has shown us that the COVID affects people differently. So it basically highlighted the inequalities. People with a more affluent background usually fared differently to people with a different background, and it really highlighted these inequalities also across our community. So for us, all important to address these inequalities, to be aware of them, and to help them, and to help people across. So, for example, you could argue it made a huge difference if people are having their own garden, could during the lockdowns enjoy their own garden, or if they're living in smaller flats where there wasn't much green spaces. So the importance of green spaces accessible for everyone is something which is really important we have to address as a borough. And it was mentioned quite often, what we have seen in the pandemic is working as partners, working in partnership. Many has said it. This really has shown the strengths of all our communities, for all the stakeholders to work together, to come together, to find new ways. And here again, it's in our responsibility as a borough to address these inequalities, but we need our partners. And again, just if I may, before I hand over to the next panelist, would like to thank everyone who has helped during the last 2 years. It was an incredible joint effort. Without our strategic partners, without the volunteering community sector, we couldn't have made it. You know, it was really great to see so many people coming together, the health service, the NHS, our doctors, everybody to make that joint effort to help all the most vulnerable in our communities. And we have to keep going and improving.
Absolutely, Andreas, thank you very much indeed. Sanya, I just bring you in just very briefly here, because actually you've already highlighted what you need to do from your perspective moving forward. So is there anything you wanted to add to that before we move on to the next question?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to mute myself. So I just, yes, I wonder whether Naz will want to mention this. I think it's very important to say that we have refreshed recently we have refreshed our health and care plan. I represent the voluntary sector on the Health and Wellbeing Board. So health inequalities, together with a few other things, are underlying issue that will be addressed through all three strands of our health and care plan. So, you know, it's something that obviously we all want, and it's a mixture of representatives on the Health and Wellbeing Board. So we have made commitment between ourselves to address health inequalities. As we know, health inequalities arise from a complex interaction of many factors. So when Pippa talks about addressing housing, income, socialized, well, not so much with Pippa, social isolation, but other organizations, disability. All of these are topics that and issues that are addressed through the work of volunteering community sectors organizations. The role of the community in this is very important because of our closeness to the people who suffer most from the greatest inequalities in health in our community.
Yeah, okay, Sonia, I'm so sorry to cut in. I'm so sorry because we've got so many questions that I'm so keen to get through, but that's brilliant. And Naz, I know you've got points to make as well, but I've got a broader issue for you coming up. If we could just turn our attention to small businesses and how they've suffered, how they are recovering now. What is Kingston doing to help businesses survive? And what does the future look like for Kingston businesses? So Forbes, I'm going to come to you on this one, just to paint us a picture of what you're seeing and how encouraging that is.
Thank you, Sian. Yes, I think there's different ways of looking at this. On a broad level, to give it the context for those who may not have been so familiar with, is that from the very beginning of the pandemic, there have been some very mandatory grants which the government have given down to local authorities to disperse to businesses. In theory, that sounds very straightforward. And certainly there was always regular news feeds from the government saying, okay, we're going to do this grant and this and that. And the expectation was almost literally overnight, local authorities were able to dispense this money. And obviously, so many businesses were saying, that sounds great, can I apply, wanting to go for it. So it's the council, I have to give them immense credit for actually turning around and actually adapting to this process of giving out grants. And within the 2 years, as I say, it is mandatory. The government did give them the money, but it's still a bit of an art. And to actually circulate this, around 61 million has been given to 21,000 businesses across the borough. It's not perfect. It never has been perfect, but I do think it has managed to get a lot of businesses over a particular line. It's been a marathon, and I think a lot of businesses have continually struggled. So that is a good story, but I'm sure many will be saying it just wasn't enough, but it's been something. And obviously the furlough scheme, which in individual businesses was a major asset to how they developed, managing everything. Smaller businesses, in Kingston, it's a very, very broad term. There's a lot of very different types of businesses and professions and skills in Kingston. So I will be fairly general with this, but I'd say in terms of sort of what's making it difficult and trying to help, the key word is collaboration. It is overused. I've said it a little bit earlier, and other guests have said it already, but it is really the only way that we all kind of come out of this situation in the borough. I will default to what the Chamber has done because, as I said earlier, our role is as an advocate, it is to connect. We have supplied 3 online business expos where businesses can pick up business seminars, networked, gain support. The university and the council were sponsors, which allowed us to reach over about 800 attendees in 3 of these events. And it is this connective sort of world that we're all living in. This is the way that people have been, we're trying to keep businesses together. So 800, I think, is a testament to the expos. It's a testament to the businesses that they wanted to connect and to get that support. We recently, last year, we set up a New Malden Business Forum, and again collaborated with the Rotary Club and the local solicitors, Pearson Hards. And that's beginning to get momentum. It's getting people to come together in New Malden. And we've even started getting Korean businesses coming together, which is really, really good news. We were a Kickstart gateway. For those who weren't so familiar with Kickstart, it was a job opportunity, again, a government scheme to try and get the harder to reach younger people into work. It helped them to get work experience, but it also helped businesses to get extra resources. So we work really hard with DWP. We've worked with other gateways in Kingston, like Achievement for Children. The Chamber ourselves, we've managed to get 60 young people into work and hopefully into full time. But as I say, that just helps businesses tap into local skills. The university developed the Kingston Innovation Network, which was to help address challenges, trends, and opportunities for support and innovation. How does the future look? Last week, we just hosted our inaugural Kingston Borough Business Awards. And from that, I have seen amazing resilience, creativity, and the ability of businesses to adapt, which is really encouraging. It's a great mixture of organizations and individuals. So on that level alone, I say there's tremendous spirit in the business community. Broader level, we have Unilever's head office coming to Kingston. We have Lidl's head office, which I saw the other day in Tolworth. So big names are coming into Kingston, which is great.
Yeah.
I'll be very quick. I'll wrap this up.
Okay. So sorry, I've got to move it on. But yeah, thank you.
I would say that there are big challenges coming ahead. The mental well-being in staff is a challenge. We can see the increase in national costs, cost of fuel, adjusting to hybrid working, which is going to be a goldmine for HR people. But I do know that the council, the college, the university are all really looking at skills and employment. It is going to be so big as we come out of this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of goodwill. It's going to be bumpy for a little while, but there's some good organisations working hard for businesses here.
Okay, that's wonderful, and thank you for painting that realistic picture there, Forbes. Thank you. A lot has been said about working online, about hybrid working. You just mentioned it now, and I just want to come to the next question, bringing in Fiona and Pippa. So it's interesting what you were saying about, you know, this works for us, didn't you, Pippa? You now said, you know, this is really working in terms of getting things online. The question that came in was, obviously there was a need to move things online during the pandemic to make sure that people could access that all-important information that you've talked about. What about help that is available for those who might be digitally excluded? Fiona, just coming to you first on libraries. I love that story of you going into that library and hearing that laughter there. But actually, what about online accessibility to stuff now? What are you taking from the pandemic and keeping? And then I'll come briefly to Pippa on that as well.
Thanks, Sian. Yeah, just a couple of small examples I was going to share. One brilliant collaboration between Kingston College, Superhighways and the library service. So we're working collaboratively so that we have Kingston College students coming into all of the libraries once a week. So a pair of 2 students come into each of the libraries, and they're there to support residents with any digital need that they have, which is great for the young people. They're gaining great experience. And they're sharing their skills with people that need the support. So that's a really fantastic project that we've got running for the next few months, all the way through up to the summer break. And the other project is one where we've accessed some public health funding, and we're working through adult social care. This is a really small scale pilot at the moment, but we use public health funding to purchase some tablets. We've lent those tablets out to residents identified through adult social care. And then we've got volunteers, digital volunteers that are willing to give their time to help those residents use those tablets and get online. And then once they're online, you know, through social prescribing and other avenues, they can access information about what's happening in Kingston, support they may need. It's just giving them the skills to use the internet and find out the information they need.
Absolutely. Fiona, thank you. Pippa, coming to you to add on to that.
Lovely. Thanks, Sian. Yes, is there help for people who are digitally excluded? Yes, there is. And yes, there has to be, because central government, local government are going to be delivering everything digitally. And the challenge for us as a borough is how do we make sure that nobody is left behind? And an understanding of what digital exclusion is absolutely vital to this. It used to be just about skills and knowledge. Fiona's talked about that a bit. Actually, it's a poverty issue now. It's about, can I afford to go online? And that's where I think we as a community have to absolutely grasp the nettle, and do everything that we can to help people. And one of the things that we're doing is we've devised a cost of living crisis toolkit, which is on our website, and we're partnering it, as Fiona has done in the libraries, with a team of people who will help people to use the digital systems. So no time for just staying with multi-channel and helping people not to be excluded by giving them paper copies of things. We all have to make sure that nobody is left behind, and that's making sure that people can afford the internet as well as having the skills.
Absolutely, thank you, Pippa. And Sanya, coming to you, because I know you've got a really, really vital example to share as well.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly remind people, if they're listening and who is listening, of a digital health hub, which can be accessed via Connected Kingston, which is our social prescribing panel in the borough. And digital health hub, you can self-refer yourself, or you can refer somebody you know. So we had referrals from social prescribers, from Kingston Library, from college and various places. So if you know somebody who needs basic digital skills, in particular all the residents who would like to know how to, for example, digitally register with their GP or talk to their GP surgery, etc., that is a good resource. There is a 2-week waiting list because resources are limited, but it's a good resource. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm aware that we need to hear from all of our voices as well. So Archie, I will come to you very shortly, as well as Peter. This one is really to be headed up by Andreas. We've already talked about mental health. We've talked about the importance of space. Andreas, you were already highlighting the difference because, you know, living in a block of flats to actually being lucky enough to have a garden, what that did for us during the pandemic. Let's talk about the green spaces. We're very lucky in the borough that we have green spaces, but what is the council going to do to encourage continued use of these physical and mental health spaces while also making sure that the sustainable and these spaces actually don't get overcrowded? What's the answer there, Andreas, do you think?
Thanks, John. Yeah, again, the pandemic has shown how important our green spaces are to our population. And Kingston is rich on green belt, and we want to keep the green belt. And we have lots of local parks. And what we as a council do and have done is we invested over the last years in our parks and green spaces. We have redone and regenerated and renovated a lot of our playgrounds and invested in our green spaces. There's one local park in my area where we've got a circular footpath which helped increasing the footfall, which helped people accessing it. People could use their bikes for the first time there. We saw for the first time people on wheelchair users using it because you could make the circular round without any hazard or issues. So we continue to invest in our green spaces, and not just invest in them for doing new stuff, but also keeping them up to speed, keeping them up to a certain standard. We also want to increase biodiversity. Again, that helps with mental health issues as well. If you have people enjoy the parks more, if there's more to see, more to enjoy, that helps as well. We have a lot of local friends groups across our parks and green spaces, and that's something really great. And so cooperating with them, helping them, enabling them, empowering them to do the great stuff they're doing, not the council saying what they have to do, but seeing them really as eye-to-eye partners. They are the ones who do the hard work and can improve the green spaces, and we want to partner with them, enable them. And also from our contractors, they're obviously caring for our and maintaining our parks, but also they're regulating the sports. So on that regard, on the question again, what we saw during the pandemic is during the lockdowns, many sports providers who couldn't do their provision indoors, they just basically went out to the parks and green spaces, and we let them do it. But for the future, it's again, we can encourage having more events, having more people doing it organized in organized ways. People can organize events. We have so much diverse, rich communities across our borough, and putting more events onto our green spaces as well. So there's much more we can do, again, all together, using Forbes' word. He doesn't like that much any longer, but it's still the word of the day: collaboration.
Absolutely. Andreas, thank you very much. And thank you to you for being so engaged, because I know that there are loads of live questions coming in, and we will come to that. So I'm just going to delay our coffee break a little bit, if you can bear with me, because I want to talk about waiting lists, and I want to talk about the NHS, and I want to bring Naz in, because I'm sure we're all really worried about the strain on the NHS. What do the waiting lists look like, and what help is available, and how we're reassessing things? So Naz, here's the question that came in specifically I'd like you to tackle. So are there plans to increase Kingston Hospital's capacity in view of the backlog of cases on the NHS waiting lists and the increase in the borough's population? Can you please just give us some insight onto how you assess and manage the current needs moving into the future?
Hi, thank you, Sean. As people probably are aware, that the following the first wave, there was a real backlog within the NHS because of the IPC, infection prevention control measures, infection rates, and focusing on helping people and supporting people who are really unwell. As regards the planning for the future, so I'll come to the waiting, the capacity in a minute. As regards planning for the future and planning for the current, every year there's an annual planning round, and what Kingston Hospital are planning to do, they're planning to look at reviewing the current and future demand requirements, and actually looking at planning for about 104% above the pre-pandemic levels of 19 to 20. Based on that, they can actually work out what they require, and to be able to try and help with some of the backlogs. Now, just to give you an idea, at the moment, there's about 100, the outpatient department is working at around about 120% business as usual compared to 1920. And currently, there are only 26 patients who are waiting longer than 52 weeks. Now, I know that sounds really quite serious, especially for those 26 patients, but against the Southwest London position of 1,100, Kingston Hospital are doing quite well. I think that just a couple of more elements I just wanted to pick out was that there are very few patients waiting over 25 weeks. The 18-week waits are significantly reducing. And because we've made use of the private sector and additional theatre capacity at Queen Mary's Hospital, that's helped manage some of the backlog. And throughout the pandemic, Kingston Hospital have stuck to the principle of not cancelling urgent procedures, including cancer. So I hope that I've managed to alleviate some of the uncertainties around that. But we are aware of the pressures on the NHS, but there are plans in place to make sure that we can cope with the backlog and also the future demand.
Absolutely, thank you. And that's such a massive question. So thank you so much for dealing with it in such a succinct way. Thanks very much, Naz. Archie, I want to come to you. This is about youth. It's about the industry, the creative industries, how they're recovering. And I think some of the things that resonated about not only, yourself, your own experience, other people in the arts, how they're recovering, would be really interesting for you to tackle this one, which is specifically around the creative industry. How's it recovering? And what can the borough do to support smaller organisations as well as emerging artists in 2022?
I think that's a really great question. I think something that I've definitely been thinking about most recently is that on the whole, I think the creative industries are recovering really, really well. If there is something that came out of the pandemic, it was that many, many people, even people who don't engage with arts and culture and creativity that often, really, really desperately missed accessing the arts. I think that whether you go to the cinema or whether you go to the theatre or you enjoy going to museums and galleries, I think that people really lacked kind of having that space to reflect, to meet other people, to kind of share their experiences and talk about arts and culture and engage in different creative practices. And I think that that's true of pretty much everybody, whether you're retired and you like to visit different museums, whether you're a young family that enjoy kind of taking part in workshops, or a young person that is trying to make it as an artist or emerging artist yourself. I think that everybody has desperately missed the presence of the creative industries. And I think that now that we're back and we're open, and as creative youth, many of us are regenerating and rebranding, I think that actually we're seeing our engagement with members of the public go up massively. And that immediately for us is translating into getting more emerging artists through our doors, more young people volunteering with us, where we're able to kind of give them the opportunities to engage in the creative industries post-COVID as well. Mm-hmm. I think something that has also come out of this for the creative industries is the digitization of the arts and cultural and creative industries has massively widened our reach. So for Creative Youth, we are a charity that works locally, but we have a national and international reach. Now, moving a lot of this online has made that so much easier. We're reaching people that we really were never reaching before. And also we're engaging with more diverse audiences and more marginalized audiences who might not necessarily be able to come to Kingston or be able to attend arts and cultural activities because of financial barriers or transport, for example. So for example, with our current So You Want to Change the Art series, this is a series of sort of panels that we put together where we get different speakers to come in and share their experiences of working in the arts and culture. And we're able to kind of bring people that wouldn't necessarily always come to Kingston, both as panelists and as audience members, which I think has been really important. And we're able to tackle issues that of course affect the borough, but are actually affecting young people and creatives nationwide and even internationally. So for example, just yesterday we had one on neurodivergency in the arts and kind of enabling people to really share their experiences there. And in January, we had one about environmentalism and climate change. And I know that that's something that we're going to touch on a little bit later as well. And then just really quickly to answer kind of the second part of the question, when it comes to how can the borough help the creative industries to continue this regeneration, I think the most important thing is giving us spaces, particularly for young people and emerging artists, giving us spaces to share our voice and use creativity to be able to kind of come back from the pandemic, where young people have really thought about what it is they want the world to look like now, and kind of giving us spaces to share that through our creativity. And that's something that is actually happening for creative youth, which is really exciting. As part of the council's redevelopment of the Riverside, there is going to be a new creative space at the Undercroft, and creative youth are going to be kind of the guardians of this space. We're going to be able to let emerging artists, community organizations, and members of the public all come and visit this space and create artistic opportunities that really fit with what they want. When we say kind of a creative space, I mean that in the broadest sense of the word. We are going to kind of bring in whatever types of art people want to see and whatever types of art people want to engage with to address whatever topic they want to engage with. We want to make it happen at the Undercroft. And kind of in the next couple of months, we're going to be making some really big, quite exciting announcements with that as well. So it's kind of those two things, making sure that the arts are constantly sort of able to address and reflect and represent people, and ultimately giving us spaces to do that, especially in a post-COVID world where I like to think we're all really looking forward to kind of engaging in creative activity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Archie. You're doing so much. It's amazing to hear. Absolutely fantastic. I'm aware that we are time-wise over for our tea break, so I'm just going to put another question. So Archie's already teed up that it was an environmental question. So I've got another one that I would like to bring Peter in to talk about, from an educational point of view, what we're doing for young people. So this question, and then we'll do the environmental one, and then we'll break, and then we'll come back, finish those, and then take your live questions as well, as talk about a particular section about specifically young people who have contributed as well online. So if I can come to Fiona and Peter for this one. We're hearing about community, how everybody pulled together, how everybody supported each other, how resilient everybody was. Keeping that going, strangers are helping, volunteering, we're all seeing this over Ukraine now as well in the borough. How can we continue to build on this and make sure that the communities really stay involved? I suppose it's that, bottling that spirit that we saw in the pandemic and moving it forward. So Fiona, I wonder whether, you'd be best placed to really comment on what we can do from a cultural perspective.
Thanks, Sian. Yes, I mean, so many members of the community came forward during the pandemic to volunteer, to do so many different things. And I think, as I said earlier, we could not have achieved what we did achieve without those people coming forward and without the community groups. And I know the community library service that delivers the library service out to vulnerable residents, to housebound residents. We actually engaged with some of those volunteers that came through the pandemic, and we've engaged with them, and they're now supporting the delivery of that critical service to some of the most vulnerable residents through the library service, which is absolutely fantastic. They go out on their bikes, they walk, maybe they drive, but whichever means of transport, they're out there delivering the books. And again, it's such a lifeline, because sometimes that may be the only person that the residents see. So when they knock on the door and they deliver a bag of books, they can have a conversation. It could be the only person, that person actually has a conversation with. So it's amazing, to have that support from those volunteers, and we could not deliver the capacity of service, that we're delivering in the way we're delivering without those volunteers. And we've got other examples, as I've already mentioned, the DigiBuddies now volunteering in libraries to support with IT. We've also had a scheme called Reading Friends, partly in the pandemic and as we came out of the pandemic. So we had some funding, external funding from the reading agency that helped us train some volunteers to share reading a piece of text with a resident, either online via Zoom or over the phone, and gradually we're going to be taking that into the physical library spaces as well. So people will come together and connect, share a joy of reading, and as well as just having a conversation and connecting and reconnecting in physical spaces, which is amazing. So I think the libraries are working with Volunteering Kingston. So we have drop-ins in the libraries with Volunteering Kingston there to talk to people about volunteering in the borough as well. Mm-hmm. So I think libraries are playing a really key role, but also we've got so many great volunteers working with us as well to support services. We really want to open our spaces up as well for the community to come in, use their skills, come together and work with us.
Fantastic, thank you. Let me come to that climate change environmental initiative question, because this is the one that I want to end on before we take a quick tea break. The question came in, which was, Kingston has started some really great climate change and environmental initiatives, but of course more can always be done. How are we going to keep alive the environmental goals post-pandemic? And Forbes, I know you were particularly keen to tackle this one, and then I'm going to get a view from Archie as well, please.
Pardon me, would you mind just starting with somebody, Archie, first on that one, please?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Archie, bouncing it back to you.
That's okay, that's not a problem. I think with environmentalism and the arts specifically, I think that there are, again, a couple of things that I can think of here. First of all, creative youth really want to kind of champion young people's voices when it comes to talking about environmentalism and climate change. And I think that actually we are seeing lots of different arts and cultural organizations kind of using their practice to raise awareness for climate change. And I think it's a really great kind of platform for people to be able to just engage. They don't necessarily have to use words. They don't have to kind of do these big speeches. They can just create pictures or music or films that kind of showcase what it is that young people are worried about, what they're concerned about, and what it is they want to change. It's something that we look at doing quite a lot as a charity as well. And we've kind of listened to our young creatives and lots of the younger people that we work with, and kind of taken on board what they have to say, and also thought about how arts and cultural organizations are a huge part of the problem. And I think that that probably goes for pretty much everybody that's on this panel, and I think pretty much everybody that is in the world of work. I think that we need to look at the practices that we engage with as organizations and as individuals. How can we do things like reducing our printing costs, making sure we turn lights off? And I know it sounds kind of really boring and basic, and we've been hearing a lot of this stuff for about 10 or 15 years, but that stuff really does matter. And at Creative Youth, we're kind of trying to put that into a formal environmental policy where we go through and increasingly start to look at every single aspect of our practice, particularly with things like arts and craft materials. How can we ensure that all of those are recyclable and that we're reusing and using up as much of the things that we have that we possibly can? So, you know, I can think of right now, like in the office, there's a filing cabinet full of old bits of paper and paints and different supplies like that. And it's about going through all of that stuff, which is a relatively boring task, going through it all and working out how can we use these things in a way that is interesting, engaging, and making sure that we're still kind of engaging our community in part of this conversation. So I think that this is something that we really want to kind of carry on working towards, is looking at how our own practice could be harming the environment. And I think that that's something that everybody in Kingston should be looking at doing wherever possible.
Absolutely, and that's brilliant. Thanks, Archie. And Forbes, where do you think that sits in terms of businesses and their mindset with that?
I think actually it's just an echo of what Archie has just said, to be honest. We've been working on something called Think Green with the council and our kind of partners around, and looking at different businesses. And really what we've tried to do is to try and put it into layman's language what this actually really means. There is so much conversation about the green economy and the green skills and all these things, but there's still a lot of confusion as to what does this genuinely mean for businesses. And I think Archie has summarized it really kind of quite well. Actually, if you can do just the small things and make those changes. But I think this is a long journey. This is a journey which isn't just going to happen over the next year. It's going to keep going. And I think there's so many businesses, actually, we've been really not surprised, but the enthusiasm, there really is an appetite as we're coming out of this pandemic eventually to actually move on to this, because I think a lot of businesses see that it is the appropriate thing to do, it's the right thing to do. And I would quickly say local procurement is incredibly important. If we can actually utilize what is actually on our doorstep, it shortens the travel, everything. Local procurement is so important. But there is a lot of businesses out there in Kingston who aren't paying lip service, they are practicing and doing this work. And I think it's just going to grow. And I just think it's just putting it into a language which people get. But yeah, Archie said it much better than me. Thank you, Archie.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. So we've cracked on through a lot. We've still got a lot more to cover, which is fantastic. So it's coming up to 20 past now. So if we take a tea break, refreshment break till past, I'll see you then. We'll then be looking at your live questions as well as dealing specifically about how we can help young people in the borough. So I will see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Hello, welcome back, everybody. Hope you are suitably refreshed. So we are together for the next 30 minutes. And I just wanted to highlight, thank you so much, by the way, for your questions. So we're going to come to those in just a moment. Before the event, we were asking for questions from the young people of the borough. And actually what was really interesting was that what came in was the sacrifices that they had made over the course of the pandemic and the impact that really young people had experienced. We've already talked a lot about that, particularly around their education as well as their social development. And they all asked, you know, how Kingston was planning to support their mental health and their social recovery. So thank you so much to all of you who did that. And particularly I'm highlighting the Kingston and Richmond Youth Council, as well as everybody else. But I did just want to spend 5 minutes or so dealing with that as a chunk. And I wanted to bring Peter in, as well as Archie, specifically to talk about young people. And from an educational point of view, perhaps you could tell us some initiatives that are helping from your perspective, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sean, and thanks for the question. It's ever such an important topic for us all now, is to replace all of the things that have been lost over the pandemic for the young people working through their curriculum, through their education, through their growth into adulthood as they progress through school and college and onto university. So there's an awful lot to think about there. The first thing I'll focus on is making sure that there's plenty of opportunity to catch up. There are gaps in the learning that our young people have done, and they're not uniform. It's not like there's a consistent hole in everybody's knowledge and learning that's just opened up and everybody hasn't learned how to do their 6 times table or something like that. There are lots of different spikes and holes and areas where people just have got a skill or a piece of knowledge that they haven't been able to acquire. And so what we're finding now is that we're having to invest a lot of time in very detailed catch-up activities with each young person individually, so that if their reading's fallen behind or they're needing to improve on their spelling, we see a lot of young people who haven't got great GCSE results, and it's our job to make sure they catch up and they're not denied an opportunity to do well in life, to take the jobs on that they're keen to do. And so we've got to work really almost on a one-to-one basis and individualize the learning support that we put in place for everybody. And I think that's what I'd encourage young people and parents to watch out for, is to make sure that everybody's getting that attention to the things that they may have missed out on, getting the resources, especially if they've had a really challenging time during the lockdowns, or their school hasn't been able to cope so well with remote learning and online activities. So there's that first. So just catching up on the attainment gaps, really important. Secondly, I've really got to back Archie's comments about that richer side of our lives, the culture, the engagement, the mutual activities that help everybody to belong, to feel like they've got a place, that they are learning about the world around them. And again, young people lost some of that. They obviously switched online and are adept at using social media to connect and build up those contacts. But actually, in-person activities, and Creative Youth is a stunning example, and we work very closely with Creative Youth at the college here. It's a thing that we passionately support and want to see succeed. But we know that it's ever so healthy for young people to have those outlets and activities, whether it's sport or culture or clubs of any sort, to belong and share that socialization to strengthen their resilience and give them that breadth of experience. And then finally, there is that whole mental health challenge that we've talked about so much. We're seeing a great deal of that. We think our mental health casework has doubled at our colleges over the last year, and are having to invest a lot of resources in making sure that our safety nets are really strong. We're really lucky to have a mental health trailblazer run by the NHS, where we have clinical psychologists embedded in our colleges. We're one of 2 of those in the country, and you couldn't ask for better timing, actually. It's a brilliant initiative, and that partnership between us and the mental health support services are allowing us to campaign on all sorts of issues with mental health providers. We've asked that the cut-off for mental health support doesn't stop at 18, that young people going through into early adulthood up to age 25 can receive that support. And we're getting, I couldn't believe it, but we're getting positive noises about that being a possible change that not only were we allowed to ask for, but may actually come through for young Londoners. So again, partnership working, good strong networks, good diagnostics and identification of people in need at an early stage are all really important there. And that's what makes a significant difference. So I don't think anybody's blind to that issue, really working hard and across those 3 different points, Sean.
Absolutely, thank you so much, Peter. So it sounds like you're doing a lot to support young people in, you know, what was a really, really difficult time. So you mentioned GCSEs, that feeling of, you know, I'll always be that kind of COVID child. You know, how does that feel? So Archie, coming to you in terms of what you can do. I mean, you've already given us some fantastic examples of what you're doing, but what would you say to build on what Peter said there?
I think similarly, I've kind of got 3 main points that I've kind of been thinking of. And the first one that I want to touch on is actually just picking up right where Peter left off, which is mental health. And I know he has just explained what the college is doing really brilliantly, but I want to re-emphasize it from both a personal and professional kind of experience. Young people's mental health in the pandemic was hugely impacted, as all of ours were. But I think entering into the world of study, entering into the world of work, and or for a lot of people not studying or not working was incredibly difficult. And I think that it's a really important thing that we need to address and that we need to touch on. And that I think that panels like this are a great way to kind of begin talking about that. But within the workplace and actually within the wider community, it's something that we need to make sure we are constantly and continually addressing directly with young people and letting young people feed in what it is they need and what services they are actually already accessing. I think that young people today are accessing more mental health services than probably any other generation. So we need to make sure that we're not necessarily replicating or duplicating the things that young people are already using and already accessing for themselves, but sort of adding and building on the things that already exist. So the arts and culture are proven. They are a great way for people to do that. Engaging with arts and culture is something which can bring a lot of kind of happiness and positivity into people's lives, but also kind of beyond that and touching maybe a little bit beyond the surface in the workplace. We've just introduced a mental health champion at Creative Youth. That's an individual who has experience in tackling and talking about mental health, who is a younger person, so possibly is more relatable and can actually share their own experiences of the pandemic. And it's somebody that is accessible to everybody that Creative Youth works with, whether that's our trustees, our staff members, volunteers, artists. And I think that somebody like that is really important, or kind of resources like those that Peter were talking about. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is I kind of want to talk about 2 words that I think get thrown around a lot when it comes to talking about young people and widening participation in all walks of life and in all workplaces. And that's inclusion and representation. And the way that I kind of see those 2 things as a young person and also somebody who works with people who are my age is inclusion is about sort of representing and including individual people. It's about making sure that people's experiences are at the kind of heart and center of what you do. And the best way to do that is to get young people to work for you and with you. And then the other one is representation. And I think that that can be maybe more about topics or issues. What is it that young people care about? What is it that young people want to address when they are delivering arts and culture, or indeed kind of anything that you are looking at producing? And then the third thing that I kind of wanted to touch on is maybe more from my personal experience. And it's around this idea of sort of, education and post-education and coming into the workforce. Something that I have massively struggled with is this narrative that working from home has been a great thing for a lot of people. It's made life a lot easier. I don't doubt that that is true. But as a young person, working from home was incredibly difficult after being unemployed for a really long period of time. The first thing I wanted to do was get out of my house. And the other thing is things like spare bedrooms, desks, laptops, equipment are really expensive. I wasn't in a position to be able to front the costs of a lot of that stuff for myself. And it took me a long time to kind of get to the point where I had all of those resources and materials. And that's just one person's experience. There are young people from all walks of life, all different areas of Kingston, of London, of the country, that have had different experiences to me. And I think it's really worth just kind of remembering and touching on some of those things, and just sort of being mindful about what it is that young people have, what they don't have, what they need and what they want. I think are really kind of important things to touch on when we think about things like building back education, building back people's social development. So those are kind of the main things that I think I can kind of add.
Absolutely, really important points. And I saw you, Fiona, nodding, so let me bring you in to build on that.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, certainly building on and developing on, you know, leading on from what Archie's been saying, the importance of cultural services and the part they play with in young people's lives. Just thinking about the libraries, for example, we encourage as many young people as we can to volunteer with us for things like Summer Reading Challenge or any activities, any interests that they have. We want to go with the interests of the young person, really, and allow them to develop activities within our library spaces. I'm thinking about the Young People's Collective, which is connected to the Heritage Service. Those young people come together and plan projects with the Heritage team and deliver them. One example we've got coming up soon, we've had some external funding via Digital Works. So we'll be doing an oral history project in Kingston, and the young people will get training on oral history, and then the product of that project will end up in our archive. I'm thinking about Kingston Music Service plays a vital role with young people in the borough, and we're looking to how we can engage with more young people that are not engaged already with the music service through funded projects. And the other critical thing is we've got an apprenticeship already in the Heritage Service, and it's looking to how we can get more apprenticeships into like the Library Service and the Heritage Service to support young people to develop their skills and futures into work as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those examples. Okay, wonderful. So we've had lots of questions come in, and you've been very good because you've been very specific about who you would like to answer them. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just tackling those. So if you just bear with me as I go to look at those questions now. And actually, if I can hear from you, Naz, you've probably been aware of that question that's come in. This is about, in the light of the data collected so far and what we now know about COVID pandemic, how equipped is the NHS and our health partners to deal with long-term effects of COVID, and particularly those with underlying health conditions and likely unknown need at this stage?
Thank you, Sean. And I think as COVID pandemic did hit, within about 3 months, we were aware that there are going to be some long-term effects. So we actually started doing the work back in 2020 on this. I think as many people are probably very aware of some of the long-term effects and the post-COVID syndrome, particularly around mental health, physical health as well, respiratory, breathing problems, fatigue, tiredness, neurological problems and cardiac problems. So we are aware of an awful lot of the long COVID symptoms that are the post-COVID syndrome symptoms that are there. And we quickly started setting up services within the community, working with our local authority colleagues, and as well as the mental health trust and the community services. We started setting up things like self-help, self-management programs, so we could guide patients to different self-help websites. And also we worked very closely with the local authority on things like Get Active program, the Kingston Stronger Together, which you'd already heard about earlier this evening. We also worked very closely with ABC, which is a breathing program to try and help patients and residents in the community. Worked very closely with Fulham Football Club to try and develop responses for long COVID patients, and also with Mind and also the community mental health services. I think on top of that, then you've got the more severe end of post-COVID, which would then need to be supported by the hospital and by specialist services. So there are specific criteria that we would then refer into the trust or into mental health services to try and give that extra bit of support. And coming back to your point around the long-term conditions, we're very well aware that an awful lot of patients, because of the COVID pandemic, have actually been put to one side with managing their long-term conditions as well as getting COVID. So we are calling those patients in. We're making sure that they're much more control with their long-term conditions, and they're actually reaping the benefits of actually getting some good health and care support now. The last thing I want to just highlight was around the staff, because the COVID pandemic has really had an effect on the staff, not only just because they're tired and fatigued and the amount of work that they've had to go through, but also on their mental health. And so the staff members themselves have actually been offered support in the trusts, in the community, in primary care, to try and make sure that they are supported around their mental health. They are supported around trying to get some rest and breaks, so that they can just replenish their energy levels again. So those are the two things I would suggest. One is about the patients, the other is about the staff, and there are community and also specialist services already set up.
Okay, all right, that's fantastic. And can I just ask you the follow-up question to that that you might have seen there, Naz, about are we planning on establishing an urgent care centre in Kingston now that we're seeing an increase in demand?
So the numbers at Kingston Hospital are going back to the pre-pandemic levels within A&E, and actually there's quite a big percentage which is actually non-urgent, which actually should be dealt with by primary care. We're increasing the capacity in primary care, but I think the solution is around a system-wide solution. So we have done an audit at Kingston Hospital. We're working with all the partners, including mental health, community services, secondary care and primary care, to come up with a solution. So I can't preempt what the answer is going to be, but we've got a series of workshops working through this so that we come up with the right solution for Kingston Hospital and for the residents in the Borough of Kingston.
Naz, thank you very much indeed. Forbes, can I come to you on the next question? Now, there was a question that we didn't answer earlier about, we're seeing lots of the face of the high street is changing, lots of empty shops. So I'd just like to do a sort of two-parter, if you like. One that was submitted earlier about, what does the future high street look like in the borough, but also then to the point of the live question that's come in about what are your thoughts on the job market locally. Unemployment, of course, we know is at a record high, but what are you seeing in terms of recovery? So those two parts, if I can.
Okay, thank you very much. The first one, I'm a graphic designer by trade. If you do a logo, everybody's got an opinion about a logo. About the high street, everybody has a view about the high street. So this is a very quick whistle stop across all of this. I think generally everybody has, through the pandemic, has appreciated far more what is actually on the high street. The independent stores have been doing generally much better than the larger stores. They've been a wee bit more imaginative and creative. But I was just reading up a few things here, is that actually as a general overview with Kingston and the retail heart of Kingston, there was a new report back in March which said that Kingston is now in the top 5 UK retail centres. It's gone up into 4th place, and that's 16 places since 2019. So as a general overview of Kingston, there's a lot which actually, compared to other areas, it's doing extremely well. In terms of the empty units, Kingston First, who are the UK's first business improvement district, their recent data has said that there is actually about 9.6 vacancy rate in Kingston. The UK is around 11.7. There are 49 vacant units, 10 are waiting to open and 13 are under offer. So it is gradually getting there. Kingston's footfall actually for 2020, the first 3 weeks of 2022 rather, was 14% below 2019, but actually the spend in Kingston was actually up 6% on the same period compared to 2019. So there may be less footfall, but there's more people willing to spend more, which is really, really encouraging. Very quickly going around, Tolworth obviously has the new little head office. There's new developments there, housing, so the ripples of that will get onto the high street there. Surbiton has a very vibrant Surbiton Farmers Market. Kingston have recently done a new social spaces project, which was launched in 2021. It's an 18-month program, which provides extra seating, greenery and biodiversity. So it'll be interesting to get feedback on that. New Malden have just applied for a High Street Recovery Fund and have gained £120,000 for that. It's only one of 15 projects around, so New Malden's good. That's going to start rolling out later on. So there's a lot of hard work to do. The marketplace of Kingston, there's a wee bit of concern there, but generally, if you keep looking back, Kingston's retail is in a fairly healthy position. If it gets up into the top 5, that's really good achievement through this really difficult period. To answer the second question, in terms of the unemployment, I'm going to throw out some stats here very quickly. Generally, the unemployment rate has been falling over the year. Currently in Kingston, we have a 3.2% of the working age population is unemployed. London is 5.4. It is still probably double, just under double the pre-pandemic level, so 3,800 people versus 2,000 before. There was a huge worry about the spike after furlough finished. There was predictions it was going to reach 11%. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and there hasn't been a spike as furlough has ended. So I think furlough has actually done a very good job. Job postings are higher than pre-pandemic across all UK regions. And I think a lot of people have heard there's far more jobs than actually people taking it. And the areas in Kingston really are health and social care, hospitality, retail, recruitment, and IT and digital. They are the areas which people are really looking for jobs. So as we come forward into this year, health and social care, hospitality, retail, recruitment, IT, and digital, that's where the jobs are. That's where the vacancies are. So I hope that gives some view.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you. And Andreas, let me come into you to ask you actually just to add on that and what we're seeing in terms of recovery on the high street.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. And yeah, I think Forbes has already given a really good answer. And just building on that, I think, like you pictured, Kingston fared fairly well, but it's to keep that, we're talking also about the recovery, the way forward. I think it's that we help our town centre and our town centres and our neighbourhoods to diversify, to be prepared for the future. And again, here we're coming to the close of the circle. We mentioned culture so often for mental health, for everything, but it also helps our recovery. Kingston is the borough, the first royal borough in the country. Kingston is where England began. 925 King Esselstyn got crowned. Kingston is also where Ziggy Stardust began 50 years ago. Kingston's aviation industry in the United Kingdom was great. So we have a history of starting things, of creativity, of arts, of startups, of being entrepreneurs. And as a council, we would like to support it. We have extra funds for the green recovery, where we want to attract more jobs in green business. We have a high street fund where we want to help all our local town centres, not just the Kingston Town Centre. And also in regards to Kingston Town Centre, what we are doing, Archie mentioned it earlier, and that's something which I'm really looking forward to, the Undercroft project, where Creative Youth is using the Undercroft, the basement, as a creative hub. And on the ground floor level, we partnered with Town Square, where we will have co-working spaces, workstations, where there will be space for cafe startups, small business, where new entrepreneurs can start. That's something we support, so to attract more jobs, more people into the borough, and also keep those talented people we have in the borough. We have a great college, we have a great university, and we want to keep the creative people in and all the great educated people in our borough, so giving them a chance in Kingston. And also, Peter could this answer most, but probably much better than I. He's also spearheading this. We have a skills and employment recovery plan, and together again with many partners. And so there's a lot going on how we want to keep employment up and help our high streets and our businesses across the borough to diversify and to build one for the future.
Okay, Andreas, thank you so much, and thank you to Forbes. And actually, you've teed up the question that is coming to Peter, but Fiona will be pleased with this as well, which is a specific one for Peter before we start to wrap things up. So the person who's written in has said, so great to see your students supporting digital training for residents in libraries. Any feedback on uptake and benefit to residents as well as students, Peter?
Well, we know that there's a big gap in digital skills, so we've got there is extra money actually through the GLA for us to run digital innovation courses, and one of the things that we have been doing is trying to develop a if you like, kind of lower level offer for adults and young people who want to improve their digital skills, use computers more effectively. And we've partnered, actually during the process of recovery, we partnered with Kingston Adult Education and Hillcroft and Richmond colleges to make sure there was a really good program of accessible provision, short courses that are designed to pick people up and give them very quickly the skills they need to go and do some of those practical things. I don't have a figure on take up, I'm afraid, Sian, but it is something that is proving popular. I do know that we're seeing people coming back, adults especially, coming back into college to do those all-important adult education courses that really died off and cost us dear during the pandemic, and people are engaging with those things again. So we know that this has highlighted skills gaps and made people reflect on what they want to learn and what they want to do. So the offers out there, take up will we can never provide enough learning to the people of Kingston and Southwest London. So please get involved, pick it up. It's all there for you, and we know that the libraries and other organisations will be there to support that offer as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter, for your commitment and your passion and your dedication that you clearly feel there. So that's absolutely wonderful. I can't believe we're nearly out of time. So I'm just going to ask my panelists as we wrap up and before we say our goodbyes to just, and be brutal on time here, just ask for one sentence of what, from their perspective, we need to keep doing more of to aid the recovery. So I'm going to go round the screen now. So Archie, you are top left on my screen. So thank you for sharing everything that you have done this evening. Absolutely wonderful. So what would you say, your final reflections, one brief sentence, if I can ask?
I'm going to go for young people specifically, but everybody. Listen to everybody, listen to young people and act on it. Make sure you follow through with what people are asking you to do.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, Sanya, for you?
I would say working in genuine partnerships, making the most of each other's strengths and talents, avoiding duplication for the benefit of our residents.
Thank you very much. Peter, coming back to you.
I echo both of those, but also making sure nobody's left behind, making sure that those with disabilities or learning difficulties don't fall to the back of the queue, and that we re-engage everybody and make sure that there are equal opportunities for everybody in the borough.
Thank you very much. Pippa, let me bring you in.
I'd say grab the lessons learnt and embrace new ways of working and making sure nobody's left behind.
Wonderful. Thank you. Forbes?
Don't try and do these things by yourself. Work in collaborations, work with partnerships. You get there far faster and quicker, and you'll enjoy it.
Okay, Naz, you're smiling at that one, so top that one.
No, I was just saying that. So actually, when you get towards the end, actually everyone said it all already. The one sentence that I'd be saying would be don't lose the integrated and collaborative working that we've achieved over the past 2 years.
Thank you very much. Okay, and Fiona?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo everyone else. Partnerships, definitely collaborative working, and connections are so important, and opening up our spaces and allowing people back in to connect. Yeah,
absolutely. And Andreas, the last word for you.
Yeah, again, yes, basically everything has already been said. And Archie started with young people. I would like to add on them, not just listening to them, but also taking them serious, and taking everybody serious, being with the inclusiveness from Peter, and not forgetting anybody, and just adding, there isn't much to add, working together at eye level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't thank you. I thank my panelists enough, and also for you all for your participation, for submitting questions live and also in advance. Thank you as well to the youth of today who also played a huge part in that. And I'm absolutely blown away by the examples, the resilience, the trust, the workings as we work through to come out the other side. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. And People have been really inspirational and really inspired by what we've heard this evening, not surprisingly. So a huge thanks again to you all, and a thanks to my panelists. And also I would just like to remind you that there will be a feedback form, so it would be wonderful if you could just stay on and do that for us. That would be brilliant, because it's only, as I said at the beginning, if we hear what you liked, what you didn't like, that we can improve on and refine moving forward. And we take that feedback super seriously. So thank you so much for your participation. The recording will be up on the Let's Talk website soon. And also, as I said, that link is going to be on the YouTube chat. So I'd like to say a huge thank you. Thank you for having me here as your chair. It's been absolutely inspirational to be involved. So I wish you a good evening. We finished exactly on time. So thank you very much indeed. And a final round of applause to my panelists. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the evening. Bye-bye.